we're also joined by Don Samuels, who is a veteran criminal lawyer. He's with us here on the program. Don, thanks for being with us, if you can hear us.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can hear you fine.
Don, what's your assessment of this indictment?
This is a massive indictment. This is the type of indictment that we were probably expecting from Jack Smith in the federal case in D.C. As you were just reporting, the number of defendants alleged to be part of this RICO enterprise, which has, a lot of its core right here in Georgia, from Trump right down to, Giuliani and Mark Meadows and Sidney Powell, a lot of local people involved in this. The allegations is that this enterprise, this organization engaged in a pattern of illegal activity, including not just the activity in Georgia with trying to convince Raffensperger to change the vote, but also threatening the Fulton County election workers. We've heard about that. The allegations in this indictment also include trying to solicit the vice president of the United States to change the vote, to change the certification, trying to solicit members of the Attorney General's office to engage in criminal acts. It's everything that we learned or watched about during the January 6th congressional hearings, finds its way into this indictment. It's a massive indictment with many, many defendants involved in alleged to be involved in many different crimes over the course of, the several months between the election and the eventual certification.
Don, stick with us. We appreciate your analysis. We are waiting for the district attorney in Fulton County, District Attorney Willis, to make remarks about this indictment in the coming minutes. But before she begins her news conference, let's go to our trenchant correspondent in Atlanta, CBS News correspondent Nikole Killion, who is outside the courthouse in Atlanta. Nikole, you've been reading over this indictment. You've been talking to sources all day and really all year about this investigation. What's top of mind for you in your reporting and in your reading?
Well, in terms of these racketeering charges, these are charges that we potentially expected for a number of reasons. One, because the district attorney has used them before in major sprawling cases, and this, of course, is notably one. But also because of the gravity of this case and the number of individuals who have been involved. I mean, we have some 18 individuals charged in addition to the former president. Using these types of racketeering charges really allows the district attorney the opportunity to almost use it as an umbrella charge to link these various individuals together, which is why there is the terminology that is used in this indictment and enterprise, because that could be individuals who do associate with each other. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's drug related. In this case, it is more politically related. And so in laying out some of the manners and methods of this enterprise, what this indictment details is the various steps that the former president and some of his top allies took to try to allegedly overturn the 2020 election, beginning with, for instance, false statements to and solicitation of state legislatures. We know that there were several hearings that were held at the state capitol back in December of 2020, where you had Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, who is named in this indictment, who tried to convince state lawmakers to try to put up their own slate of electors and not to certify the results of the election. I spoke with one former state lawmaker who actually testified before the grand jury today, who told me that even then, as she was sitting in that hearing, and she was a Democratic lawmaker, mind you, that, she thought that these claims were ridiculous that Rudy Giuliani was making, and ultimately many of them were disproven in terms of illegal ballots and ballots stored in suitcases and the like. But this indictment really details those types of steps, this pressure campaign against state officials. As you mentioned, Governor Kemp, who appeared before the special purpose grand jury many months ago. We also had former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who appeared before the grand jury today, who presided over the state Senate at the time. So there was this pressure campaign, according to this indictment, against some state officials, that this went on beyond that in terms of trying to come up with this slate of false electors. We know some of the witnesses who testified today actually witnessed one of those meetings in progress. So the indictment references this. And then just going beyond that, when you have these racketeering charges, basically what it lays out are some of these predicate or overt acts that have led to these charges. And so we can see in the indictment that one of the initial overt acts, if you will, was on November 4th of 2020, when this indictment says that the former president, in a nationally televised speech, falsely declared election victory. So that is just, what we've been able to glean thus far from reading through this indictment. Again, we are looking at some 41 charges, 13 of those against the former president tonight.
Nicole, terrific reporting. Please stay with us. We're still waiting for District Attorney Fani Willis to make remarks about this indictment tonight in Fulton County, Georgia. And tonight, the Trump campaign lashed out at the Fulton County District Attorney in a statement saying, quote, Democrat District Attorney Fani Willis is a rabid partisan who is campaigning and fundraising on a platform of prosecuting President Trump through these bogus indictments, end quote. David Becker is with us. He is CBS News' election expert. He also co-wrote The Big Truth, Upholding Democracy in the Age of the Big Lie. David, thanks for being with us here tonight. How would you break down this indictment?
Thanks, Robert. I think there are three kind of buckets of charges that are being alleged here. One is the fake electors scheme, the effort to create these false slates of electors that were delivered to the National Archives, recruiting those members to sign those documents. Second is the attempt to seize and potentially breach voting machines. This is an effort, particularly in Coffee County, Georgia. There's an individual in the indictment, Kathleen Latham, who's mentioned there, who was involved with that. And then lastly, kind of broadly, the attempt to pressure and threaten elected officials, legislators, the governor, and then most notably Secretary of State Raffensperger. These are the kind of three buckets of claims. And we have to recognize also that while these schemes were all going on, there were efforts in the courts to challenge the election results and bring evidence that allegedly would show that there were problems, and every one of those failed. There was even a Trump-appointed judge, Judge Grimberg, who heard claims in Georgia and found that there was no merit to them whatsoever. And this was ongoing well past the time when those claims were being reviewed by courts. So we're still sitting here over 1,000 days after the November 2020 election, and there has still not been a shred of evidence shown to any court anywhere in the country, including in Georgia, that would back up any of those claims. So I think that's really kind of the context in which we're looking at all of this.